Ancient beginnings, pre-2000 BCE. Cradle of civilization. Afghanistan's history begins in deep antiquity, stretching back to at least 50,000 years ago, when early humans inhabited its caves and river valleys. Archaeological findings in the Hazara region in the Hindu Kush indicate Paleolithic settlements, while Neolithic communities flourished in areas like Mundigak, near Kandahar, and De Marasi, Gondai near Quetta. These early settlements were characterized by farming, rudimentary tools, and primitive architecture. Mundigak, in particular, emerged as a proto-urban center around 3000 BCE, complete with granaries, temples, and citadels, signifying early complexity and organization. These settlements linked Afghanistan culturally and economically to early Mesopotamian, Iranian, and Indus Valley civilizations. The region's position at the convergence of trade routes made it a vital corridor of cultural diffusion. The Bronze and Iron Ages 2000 to 600 BCE, Aryans and the rise of Aryanabi, the second millennium BCE, Indo-Iranian Aryan migrations brought new languages, customs, and religious practices to the region. These Aryans, ancestors of many Pashtun, Tajik, and Persian-speaking peoples, introduced early Vedic beliefs that later evolved into Zoroastrianism, influencing local cosmology and governance. Afghanistan was known to the ancient Persians and Greeks as part of Aryana, broad cultural and geographical term encompassing eastern Iran, western India, and Central Asia. Cities like Bactra, modern Balkh, became early centers of learning and spirituality. Zoroastrian fire temples, nomadic tribal cultures, and early satrapies provincial systems developed during this period. By the 6th century BCE, Afghanistan was firmly absorbed into the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great, forming satrapies such as Bactria, Arachosia, and Drangiana. These regions contributed soldiers, taxes, and resources to the Persian kings, while maintaining a degree of tribal autonomy. Hellenistic and Greco-Bactrian period, 330 to 130 BCE. Alexander and after in 330 BCE, Alexander the Great invaded Afghanistan during his conquest of Persia, facing fierce resistance, especially in Bactria and Sogdiana. Although Alexander eventually subdued the area, it remained difficult to govern. After his death in 323 BCE, the region passed to the Seleucid Empire, but effective control was minimal. By 250 BCE, local satraps, especially in Bactria, broke away and founded the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. This was a rare fusion of Greek and Central Asian cultures, with cities like Ai Khanum showcasing Hellenistic architecture, theaters, and art combined with Zoroastrian and local elements. The Greco-Bactrian period also marked the introduction of coinage, urbanization, and the spread of Buddhism, which Greek rulers like Menander I embraced and helped propagate eastward. Kushan Empire and the Buddhist Golden Age 130 BCE 300 CE cultural zenith following the decline of the Greco-Bactrians. Nomadic tribes like the U.S. migrated from Central Asia and established the Kushan Empire, which lasted from the 1st to 3rd centuries CE, under emperors like Kanishka the Great. The Kushans built a vast and prosperous empire that stretched from Afghanistan to northern India. They patronized Buddhism, promoted Sanskrit and Prakrit, and sponsored monumental architecture, including Bamiyan's giant Buddha statues, which stood as symbols of a rich artistic and spiritual tradition. Afghanistan during this time became a center of Greco-Buddhist art, seen in sculptural relics found in Haida, Bagram, and Bamiyan. The Kushians also linked the Silk Road, making Afghanistan a hub of commerce between Rome, China, and India. Though largely tolerant of multiple faiths, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, and early Christianity, their sponsorship of Buddhist scholarship and art left a lasting cultural legacy. Sassanid and Hephthalite periods, 300 to 650 CE, Zoroastrian revival. and turmoil. The fall of the Kushans saw Afghanistan divided between local kingdoms and external powers. The Sassanid Empire of Persia reasserted control over western Afghanistan, reintroducing Zoroastrian orthodoxy and battling with Eastern Roman Byzantine influences. However, by the 5th century CE, the region came under the sway of the Hephthalites, White Huns, nomadic invaders who disrupted the region, clashing with both Sassanids and Gupta India. Though often considered destroyers, the Hephthalites adopted local customs and built cities like Kapisa. They left an imprint on regional art, military practices, and feudal structures. The persistent instability, however, laid the ground for future conquest. The Islamic conquest and early caliphates, 652–870 CE. Islam's arrival. Islam entered Afghanistan after the defeat of the Sassanids at the hands of Arab Muslim armies in the 7th century. The conquest of Herat, Balkh, and Kandahar took decades, meeting with tribal resistance. By the 8th century, Abbasid caliphs consolidated authority in eastern Khorasan, though often through local Persianized governors. Cities like Balkh became centers of Islamic learning, hosting scholars like Al-Fadl ibn Sahl and later Avicenna ibn Sina. Despite initial Arab dominance, local dynasties like the Tahirids and Samanids rose to prominence, blending Persian and Islamic traditions. The process of Islamization was gradual. Buddhism and Zoroastrianism coexisted for centuries before, eventually, declining. Persian language and Islamic jurisprudence became dominant, setting the stage for the region's Muslim identity. The Ghaznavids and Its 10th–12th century imperial expansion in the 10th century. The Ghaznavid Empire, founded by the Turkic slave soldier Subuktigin, emerged in Ghazni. His son, Mahmud of Ghazni, expanded the empire deep into the Indian subcontinent through a series of campaigns that combined military conquest with religious zeal. Mahmud's raids brought immense wealth and spread Persian Islamic culture into India. Ghazni became a flourishing capital, home to poets like Ferdowsi and scientists like al-Biruni. The Ghurid dynasty, originating in central Afghanistan, rose to prominence in the 12th century and succeeded the Ghaznavids under Muhammad of Ghor. They extended Muslim rule deeper into northern India, laying the foundations for the Delhi Sultanate. This period also saw increased Persianization, urbanization, and the spread of Sunni orthodoxy across Afghanistan, Mongol invasions, and the Timurid Renaissance. 13th–15th century. The 13th century brought devastation with the arrival of Genghis Khan. In 1221, Mongol forces razed cities like Balkh, Herat, and Nishapur, killing tens of thousands. The Mongol occupation fractured Afghanistan into small khanates and vassal territories. Despite initial destruction, by the late 14th century, Timur Timurlane, a Turco-Mongol warlord, established control over the region. He rebuilt cities like Herat, which flourished under his descendants. The Timurid Empire fostered a cultural renaissance, with Herat becoming a center for art, astronomy, architecture, and literature. Figures like Kamal Uddin Behzad in miniature painting and Al-Ashir Navia in literature elevated Timurid Herat to rival any capital in the Islamic world. However, the empire's decline by the early 16th century led to renewed instability. The Mughals, Safavids, and Afghan resistance, 16th–18th century. Afghanistan in this period was contested between three powers: the Mughals of India, the Safavids of Persia, and local Pashtun tribes. While the Mughals, descended from Timur, controlled Kabul and Kandahar intermittently, the Safavids often held Herat and western regions. The region's mountainous terrain and tribal loyalties ensured that no empire could hold all of Afghanistan easily. The Pashtun tribes, particularly the Ghilzis and Abdalis, later Duranis, began asserting greater autonomy. In 1709, Mirwais Hotak, a Ghilzai leader, led a successful revolt against Safavid rule in Kandahar, founding the short-lived Hotak dynasty, which even captured Isfahan, the Safavid capital. However, Persian resurgence under Nader Shah crushed the Jotaks by 1738. The Durrani Empire and formation of Afghanistan, 1747 to 1823. After Nader Shah's assassination in 1747, his former general, Ahmad Shah Abdul, a Pashtun from the Abdali tribe later called Durrani, seized power and founded the Durrani Empire, considered the foundation of the modern Afghan state. His empire extended across modern Afghanistan, eastern Iran, and northern India. Though not a centralized state, Ahmad Shah's reign brought relative unity to the diverse ethnic groups of Afghanistan. He was crowned in Kandahar, which became the first capital, later succeeded by Kabul. He conducted several campaigns into India, including the famed victory at the Third Battle of Panipat, 1761. After his death, succession disputes and tribal rivalries weakened the empire, but the Durrani legacy endured. The term Afghanistan, meaning land of the Afghans, came into broader use during this period. The Great Game and Anglo-Afghan Wars, 19th century. In the 19th century, Afghanistan became the focal point of strategic rivalry between British India and Tsarist Russia. Known as the Great Game, fearing Russian expansion, the British invaded Afghanistan in 1839, sparking the First Anglo-Afghan War, which ended disastrously for Britain after the annihilation of its retreating army from Kabul. The Second Anglo-Afghan War, 1878-1880, led to British control over Afghanistan's foreign affairs, though the country retained internal autonomy. Abdur Rahman Khan, known as the Iron Emir, was installed by the British and began centralizing the Afghan state, often through brutal repression. He oversaw the Durand Line Agreement, 1893, with British India, which fixed the eastern border, but remains a point of tension with Pakistan today. Despite British influence, Afghanistan was never colonized. Independence and reform. 20th century, 1919 to 1973. Afghanistan regained full independence in 1919 under King Amanullah Khan, after the Third Anglo-Afghan War, inspired by Adat Rek Est. Reforms in Turkey. Amanullah initiated a modernist agenda, emphasizing education, women's rights, and secularization. However, conservative backlash forced his abdication in 1929. Mohammad Nader Shah, and later his son Zahir Shah, ruled through a constitutional monarchy until 1973. This period saw modest modernization, constitutional reforms, and neutrality during global conflicts like World War II and the Cold War. By the 1960s, a multi-party parliamentary system was introduced, but political instability and social inequality persisted. Republic, coup, and communist rule 1973 to 1979. In 1973, Mohammad Daud Khan, Zahir Shah's cousin, staged a coup and declared a republic. Initially a reformist, Daud turned increasingly authoritarian. In 1978, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDP, AA, Marxist-Leninist Party, overthrew Daud and established a communist state under Nur Muhammad Taraki. The PDPA implemented radical reforms, land redistribution, secularization, and women's rights. These reforms, imposed rapidly and without local consent, sparked massive unrest. As the regime fractured and violence escalated, the Soviet Union invaded in December 1979, initiating one of the most consequential conflicts in Afghan history: Soviet-Afghan War and Mujahideen resistance. 1979 to 1989, the Soviet occupation met fierce resistance from the Mujahideen, a loosely organized but highly motivated coalition of Islamist and nationalist fighters, backed by the United States, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and China. The Mujahideen turned the war into a Cold War proxy conflict. The Soviets bombed villages, displaced millions, and committed atrocities, but failed to suppress the insurgency. 1 million Afghans died. Millions more became refugees in Iran and Pakistan. The war also fueled Islamic radicalism, producing future actors like Osama bin Laden. In 1989, the Soviets withdrew, leaving behind a fractured Afghan state. Civil war and rise of the Taliban, 1989 to 2001. After the Soviet withdrawal, the communist government under Najibullah survived until 1992, but was eventually overthrown by the Mujahideen. What followed was a devastating civil war among rival Mujahideen factions. Kabul was shelled, lawlessness reigned, and atrocities mounted. In 1994, a new Islamist movement, the Taliban, emerged from Kandahar, composed of students from Madras and former Mujahideen, promising stability and Sharia law. They quickly gained ground. By 1996, they captured Kabul and ruled most of the country, imposing a harsh interpretation of Islam, banning music, education for girls, and public dissent. Their harboring of Al-Qaeda led to global isolation. U.S. invasion in the Islamic Republic, 2001 to 2021, following the 9/11 attacks. The United States invaded Afghanistan in late 2001, toppling the Taliban with the help of the Northern Alliance. A new government was established under Hamid Karzai, later followed by Ashraf Ghani. Billions in international aid flowed in, and progress was made in education, women's rights, and media. However, corruption, ethnic divisions, and a resurgent Taliban undermined stability. Despite 2 decades of effort, the Afghan army collapsed rapidly in August 2021. When U.S. and NATO forces withdrew, the Taliban once again seized power, re-establishing the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Modern Afghanistan 2021 present under renewed Taliban rule. Afghanistan faces economic collapse, human rights concerns, and global isolation. Women have been excluded from secondary and higher education, civil liberties curtailed, and minorities, particularly Hazaras, persecuted. Despite pledges of moderation, the Taliban remain deeply conservative and repressive. The international community is divided on engagement, while humanitarian crises escalate. Yet, Afghan society remains resilient. Journalists, civil activists, and underground educators continue their work quietly. Afghanistan's story remains one of endurance amid adversity, a land of empires, poets, martyrs, and survivors whose history is both its burden and its pride.